It's Two on the Aisle with me, Charles Gross, and Leslie Hoban Blake. Tonight reviews of Cinderella, Old Jews Telling Jokes, and Breakfast at Tiffany's. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Two on the Aisle. Good evening. I am the aforementioned Charles Gross.
And I am Leslie Hoban Blake. Hello.
Yes. And tonight on Two on the Aisle, we are going to try an experiment. It has been brought to our attention that sometimes we interrupt each other, and at other times we talk too much. So tonight, something to address both issues. Using this high-tech tool, which I got at a garage sale at 60 minutes, we will be timing. The person who starts the review will get 90 free seconds. And after that, the other one is free to chime in. Okay.
Or it's a free-for-all, in other words. Yes.
So, are we ready to try this?
I'm with you.
All right, here we go. Our first show of the evening, Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella. Oh, by the way, this thing makes a run revelation every 30 seconds, so it goes around 3 times before you can talk. All right, well, Rodgers and Hammerstein originally wrote Cinderella as a television special for Julie Andrews, who was post My Fair Lady, but pre-Mary Poppins. It was done live, singing and everything. So take that movie version of Les Mis. And it was a big success. It not only had Julie Andrews, but it had Kay Ballard and Alice Ghostley as the stepsisters. And it was a major success. It was remade a few years later with Leslie Ann Warren in the title role. And then a few years after that, again on TV with Brandy and Whitney Houston as the fairy godmother. And then, more recently, it was at Lincoln Center, although not at their Broadway Theatre, with Sally Ann Howes from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang as the fairy godmother. So since it was not at the Broadway Theatre at Lincoln Center, this can be legitimately called Cinderella's Broadway debut. And I have to say I was a little concerned because they had Douglas Bean Carter doing...
Douglas Carter Bean.
Excuse me, Douglas Carter Bean, sorry, Doug, who did such a wonderful job with Xanadu, and they said he's updating it. And I thought Xanadu was great, but it was very tongue-in-cheek. And Little Dog Laughed, which was his play, was very cynical. And I said, and then I heard he was doing away with Cinderella's parents. And I said, oh, I don't like the sound of this. Well, I could not have been more wrong. Because instead of hurting it or changing it, what he's done, along with the director Mark Brokaw, he did for Cinderella what J.K. Rowling did for the Wizarding World in Harry Potter. And he basically took all these wonderful traditions that have come before and influences and wove them together for this just beautiful version of the musical. For example, some of the influences I saw, Sondheim's Into the Woods, at least based on the opening set. Mm-hmm. The chorus that you hear in front of some of the classic Disney cartoons. So we've got Disney and Sondheim. Never thought you'd see those two together. The Lion King, so some puppetry in there, and some other puppetry which reminded me of the old kiddie shows, like Soupy Sales with Chuck McCann.
That was more than what I thought
in the 60s. Yeah. Well, I was thinking of the coach, how the coach ran the
I was thinking of the little puppets in the trees.
Well, yes, well yes,
it's past 90 seconds.
So you can join
I can
in.
Talk now, yeah.
So that was the influence, and even the Bible.
I took your daughter, and a lot of people have said to me, "Did you like it?" And I said, I saw it through the eyes of Charlie's daughter. Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I think I saw it. Yes, your younger daughter. And she sat there like this. So I think that it was a major success. I did not dislike it. I wasn't blown away by it, but I certainly was pleasantly surprised. I have nothing but admiration for Douglas Carter Bean for taking it on in the first place. And this is a year of a lot of people, and we're going to be talking about another play where somebody took it on, where people have taken on existing texts of one sort or another and adapted them, both musical and non-musical. And I think, as you said, you pulled in all the influences I would have mentioned. I don't know if it would come up with the Bible, but I saw everything you were talking about. I love the little hand puppets, but they were so low-tech.
Yes.
Absolutely low-tech. It was unbelievable. Yes. And all the costume changes were essentially low-tech because people were underdressed or overdressed so that you would pull it up or push it down or do whatever. So it worked very, very well. It was it was tongue-in-cheek, it had a light touch. The one person,
But it wasn't really that TV.
I would like to talk a little bit about the people who were in the cast. Two of my favorites, and one I know is a favorite of yours, Laura Osnes, whom I didn't like in Grease, has become my favorite go-to ingenue of recent time, who is just a lovely Cinderella. And her Prince Charming, who is a little bit of a dunderhead in this version.
Well, he's very princely because he comes out and he kills this big wooden tree thingy, and then you know, on the side he slays a dragon with a slingshot. So he does all these prince things, and he's thinking, but gee, I want to do something to help humanity.
He's a dunderhead. Anyway, the point is, he's played by Fausto Santino, whom we saw
Santiano Fontana.
Santino? Say it again.
Santiano Fontana.
One for Charlie. Good.
Yes.
Who we saw in Bright and Reach Memoirs, whom we liked so very much in that very short version. But the star of the evening for me was a woman I have loved for years, Harriet Harris, as the I want to say the Wicked Witch, but she's the stepmother.
Well, she's not a witch.
No, and she's a stepmother with her tongue in her cheek, because Doug fixed it so, or the director Mark Roca did something to make her not quite so evil. She's evil, but she's got a sense of humor, or she's evil, but she laughs about it, or I don't mean laughs about it in an evil way. She enjoys being evil. Yes. And somehow that gives her a humanity, which I don't quite understand.
Well, I didn't quite get that from her, but what I thought interesting was not Harriet Harris, as Marla Mindell, as the older as one of the stepsisters. I don't know if she's older or not. They've decided to be very innovative. They've made her nice.
Well, yes.
Sort of. But pretty much. And they've given her a love interest who her mother doesn't like because he's the town radical.
Yes, which is very funny. That's the town radical.
You know,
yes,
a new
in Cinderella,
add to him, which means that Anne Harada, who was the original Christmas Eve in Avenue Q, and who you can kind of sort of see her in Smash.
Yes.
You know,
sort of, kind of.
She has to do all the mean stuff.
Well,
and she does. Well, she it's all on her shoulders to be the mean stepsister. And she is wonderful. I agree with you. I like Laura Osnes. Singing was not as good as I've seen
well, it wasn't Julie Andrews, but I mean, nobody is.
And that's probably the worst thing we can say about her.
I would say that's the worst thing you could say about her.
Although, interestingly, the way they've costumed her, she did remind me a little of Leslie Ann Warren in the role.
Oh, yeah. Well, you have so many to draw on in this particular show.
And that was
never
have.
Seen. Now, you said it was seen at Lincoln Center. It was seen at the Opera.
Well,
but you have to be. But you can't say like the Lincoln Center, because if it had been at the Lincoln Center Theater, then it would have been eligible.
Well, but I also said it wasn't at that theater.
No.
Yes,
you're missing my point. You didn't say opera, and the point is it was at the Opera. It was at the State Opera. It was not at the Lincoln Center Theater.
It was not at the Lincoln Center Broadway Theater.
It wasn't at any of their theaters. It was in the Opera.
That's still part of Lincoln Center.
Okay, all right. It brings up big points about awards, though, about whether it's a new show or a revival.
It is a new show. We have established that from day one.
Okay. The Tonys are going the other way, by the way. They're calling it a revival, just so you know.
Really?
Yeah, just so you know.
So they say that Lincoln Center...
Right.
Okay,
that's right.
interesting.
The opera version.
And what will the drama disc say?
Well, I'm not going to tell you. The drama disc. We'll announce that when it announces it. And then I will be at liberty to say.
Right.
But in the meantime...
it does have a new book.
It does. And I did not want to leave without mentioning Peter Bartlett as the very handy
Prime Minister, whatever he's
supposed to be, right?
The advisor. Oh, that's another thing they borrowed from Disney, because he comes out and he looks just like Jafar from Aladdin.
Well, I didn't see that, but okay.
And like Jafar, he's kind of evil.
Well, he and the stepmother are in cahoots, which was not in the original story. There was no way that there were people
There's a lot here that wasn't in the original, but you know what? It's still Cinderella. You will still fall in love. And they give you extra reasons. You know, here, this is not just a Cinderella who's depending on her shoes. You give her, there's one song, Do I Love You Because You're Beautiful, or Are You Beautiful Because I Love You? And yes, she's beautiful, but yes, she is beautiful.
Well, your daughter
inside it out
was not wearing one, but there were a bunch of little girls, younger than your daughter, wearing tiaras and holding wands, and they were having a great time. Now, that's an expensive ticket to have a great time at, but still in all.
Well, my older daughter, who can be a little more cynical, I think she liked it even more than my younger daughter. So this is definitely one to bring the family to.
Yeah, because she's on that cusp of being a grown-up.
I'm going to give it, I think, four and a half playbills.
I'd go with that. I'd give it 4.5. Yeah, I'd say 4 first, and then say maybe 4.5. But yes, an evening, a well-spent evening in the theater, I would say.
Yes. And now, as Monty Python used to say, for something completely different.
Well, the something completely different has probably one of the most offensive titles on Broadway that you can actually print in the New York Times. And the title is Old Jews Telling Jokes. Well, if you can get past the title, you can have a very good evening in the theater, because it's actually very descriptive of what happens at the West Side Theater every night, and has been happening for almost a year now. We're only getting to it because it was one of those shows that sort of slipped through the cracks at earlier times, and since it has lasted, and since it's going to keep on lasting, we thought we would make sure you hear about it from us. And again, a descriptive title, because it's got a cast of 3 old Jews, 2 younger people who may or may not be Jewish. I'm not sure.
We have never established
their names are not specifically Jewish, so I wouldn't know. But you're in for an evening of, if you'll pardon the expression, unleavened fun. It's humor, but with such oldies as 3 old people come in, they sit down on a bench, and the first one goes, and the second one goes, and the third one goes, and then one of them looks at the others and says, I thought we weren't going to talk about the children. With that joke, you have a sense, and thank you for the laugh, and that's the whole point. He knew what I was going to say, and he laughed anyway. I will take it that it was from the delivery, and that's the whole point of this show. These jokes are as old as time, or Methuselah, or whatever reference you want to use, but they are so well done.
Henny Youngman would have felt quite at home.
Well, no, actually, Henny Youngman wouldn't have felt that much at home, because they're not Henny Youngman type jokes. I love the way you're taking your breath and holding. Thank you.
There we go. now I can join.
It's okay, because
you're right. They're not Henny Youngman jokes per se, because he did the one-liners, but they're old. And I think you're absolutely right. It is the delivery, it is the cast, it is the direction, it is the people who created it that really puts it together. It's, I think...
Well, I have their names. I have Marilyn Sokol, Todd Sussman, and Lenny Volpe are the older 3. Right. And then the younger people are, you can give those names, because you've got them on that list, and I can't.
All right. I think that's Bill Army, and Audrey Lynn Weston.
Audrey Lynn Weston. Now the first 3, and the one that you know the most,
Rooney,
the one that you've known the most is... I would say is probably Marilyn Sokol, who's been around forever and been in 100 shows. No, really, she used to work at my old theater, so she's been around for a long time, as have I.
As anyone who remembers Trixie True, Teen
Yes, one of the better references points for her. And Lenny Volpe's been around since Mayor. He created the role in Mayor,
right? Yeah.
So he's been around.
There's a show that has a great score, but would need a lot of book rewrites.
But to finish about this,
it's a good time.
To finish about this, in honor of the dead mayor, yes. To finish about this, the one that I did not know was Todd Sussman. And Todd Sussman has been around, and he's done the circuit, and he plays comedy clubs, and his delivery is the funniest thing I've ever seen. He does absolutely nothing. He stands on stage, he's a little old man, he's got a quiet thing, and he goes like this, and he talks, and he talks, and he tells a joke, boom, and he's off. And you suddenly go, ha, 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 and you're laughing at a joke that you know.
At this old joke, and not necessarily a clean joke.
At this old guy telling this old joke.
This is not one you would want to bring your younger children to. No. My teenagers would have been fine with it, but small children, no, you do not at all want to bring them.
But they're funny, they hold up.
And you would think that this is something that belongs in the Catskills.
But the evening is done as a show.
As Jackie Mason would have put it, you know what? This used to be schlock, but now it's art.
Well, I never heard him say that. But the point is, it's very well staged by Mark Bruni. By the way, the 2 guys who really deserve a lot of credit are the producers here, who have gone to the wire for this show. I've seen them on all kinds of TV shows. And their names are Daniel Ockrent and Peter Getchins, I think.
Gethers?
Gethers, thank you. I didn't get that one right.
Well, they're the creators of the show. Well, they chose the jokes, I think. I think that at least that's how they're listed.
Well, yes, and they go on various shows to talk about the fact that this is near and dear to their heart, and they're both guys who were successful in other kinds of work, and this is the only creative kind of thing I think that they're doing, but they've done it very well. And then the staging is beautiful, because there's a little television set on the stage, and it announces the different titles of the various subject matters of what's going to happen, and then you get the jokes. The nice thing about it is each of the characters, the 3 older and the 2 younger, each get a monologue, and they have a name, like the younger girl is Debbie. And good luck remembering them.
Yeah,
well, but each one tells a little story about him or herself, which then pulls the whole thing together. It's kind of like being with your uncle. We're just going through the Passover season. Maybe you're at a Seder and a Passover, an uncle decides to tell a joke. That's the way this feels. The audience has come prepared to laugh. Their expectations are more than met. I've seen it twice.
I don't think this is a show with high expectations. I did not come in with high expectations.
I had no expectations with that title. I was turned off by the title, I have to be honest. But I had a good time twice, not once, but twice.
Yeah.
So
I agree with you. I never thought I would say this is a 4-playbill show, and it really isn't. Except for what it is, it's just done so well. It's and this is never going to be great theater, great, whatever. It will not go down as the classic, but you're just going to go and have a good time. It's not even, like it's bland or it's easy going, as in some shows are just enjoyable. This show is out and out funny, and that is why I am being so generous. It deserves it. It shouldn't, but it does.
But you know what? I'm going to give it a 4.5 because I laughed as much, if not more, the second time. Ooh. So that's the 0.5 they get.
All right. So it's even better the second time.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you don't have to be Jewish to like the show. One of us had to say that.
No, you do not. You do not. And for reference, Jackie Mason in his first Broadway show, when I think it was The World According to Me, he had a career basically of going into clubs, and he had a major downfall when he had a falling out with Ed Sullivan years ago, and he got his chance on Broadway, and he said, I'm doing the same stuff that I've always done. I used to be schlock, and now I'm Art.
Okay.
He said, I do the exact same stuff on Broadway.
I didn't get the reference, but yes. I have to be honest, I don't like Jackie Mason. So there. If this had been a show with Jackie Mason, I would not have gone.
All right. Well,
so there.
Well, certainly you have an old Jew who tells jokes there.
They certainly do.
All right. And now for something totally different. Boy, we're really doing some very versatile theater tonight. We're talking Breakfast at Tiffany's.
That's versatile theater.
And like Cinderella, it's based on something that has gone before. And like Cinderella, it has a prestige playwright, Richard Greenberg, writing it. Unlike Cinderella, it is not a musical, and unlike Cinderella, I didn't enjoy it very much. So here's my take on it. You see, I think the woman here, Holly Golightly in this show, by the way, Holly is short for holiday, I never knew that, must have seen the movie with Audrey Hepburn. And she said, boy, this looks wonderful. I got to try that. And so she did. But unfortunately, it worked out a lot better for Audrey Hepburn than it does for her. Because this is a play that you told me, I've never actually read the Truman Capote book. This comes a lot closer to the book.
It's a novella.
And it's not necessarily better for doing so. Here, it's more dramatic, except that it's not. It's certainly sadder. And, we'd actually never really know what finally happens to Holly. Now, you may remember Holly is a girl from the South or the Midwest or something who came to New York to reinvent herself. She had a much older husband who she married when she was very young because she really had no other choice. And she kind of reinvented herself as a New York sophisticate. And I think the best description of her is she's a phony, but she's a real phony. In other words, she is a phony, sort of, but she really believed in what she was doing. Now, in this case, the other thing that they've kind of upgraded or pulled out a little more is how Holly kind of gets her money, and her companion Fred, who in the movie they fall in love. Here, he loves her at first, but here's the part I wasn't quite sure I understood. Is he supposed to be gay? So then it's confusing. Why is he pursuing her at first? If he's gay, why is he so interested in having her? He appears to want a romantic relationship with her, but if he's gay, why does he care so much?
Can I answer?
You may answer,
okay.
Please.
May I answer? Well, because he's attracted to her outre sense of fashion and style and who she is, and he's a little country boy himself. He comes in from the Midwest, and he looks like, in this particular play, he looks like a college boy of that period, And it's very interesting to me that this play allows him to be gay, and maybe because Richard Greenberg, who wrote the new script, is gay.
Well, was he gay in the book?
He's gay. Yes, he's gay in the book. It's not a love story, but he's not openly gay in the book because it was written at a time when you couldn't be openly gay.
Well,
so
he's not really openly gay here.
He's not exactly. But it's covert, and if you know the subtext, then you know.
And it's hard because you know,
He's supposed to be Truman Capote. That's the whole point.
well, he seemed to be, but then at first he seemed to be.
Yeah.
Then he wasn't acting very Capote-ish. And then there's an incident that, you know, he's gay, or that happens, that kind of shows that he's gay. Except, I went there with my daughter, who absolutely adored the movie. And I thought, well, did I miss it? Did I miss something? Is he supposed to? And she said, I'm not sure either. So they're a little too subtle about it.
Again, if you've read the story, there's no love story there.
Right.
But again, it's like with the conversation we had about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, which at a time period wasn't allowed to be spoken
Right.
of. The love that dare not speak its name, so it didn't, you know. But be that as it may, there's so many other things. I'm sorry, I must be the only person in New York who came to this thinking it was the old musical, and that Richard had written a new book.
It was not. I thought it was going to be a musical at first.
I thought when Mary Tyler Moore was in it, it was a musical.
It was.
Yes, so I thought this was a rewrite of the musical.
That is what I thought.
I've had a lot going on in my life, and I didn't get to read much about this, so I went expecting this to be a
Right.
rewrite of that musical, the way Cinderella was a rewrite of another musical. That's
Right.
what I expected.
Right, and
So after the first 10 minutes, I was going like, where's the music? You know, like, I'm
yeah.
waiting for a song.
Well, there
and
is
then
there
I got
is a
it, that
song.
there wasn't
There
one.
is the scene where she's playing her guitar on
Yes.
the balcony.
And it wasn't Moon River.
No, it's not Moon River. That's the thing.
I want to talk about the girl.
Okay.
The girl is from the Game
Emilia
of
Clarke.
Thrones. Say it again.
Emilia Clarke.
Thank you. It's from Game of Thrones, which I also don't watch. But on Game of Thrones, she's got this blonde, crazy wig that goes down to her gizzing, which are now her knees. I use that word generically. And I've never watched it, so I don't know her. She's a kind of a waifish, small person. I don't know how that fits in, except that Holly Golightly is a kind of a waifish, small person.
Well,
The
yes.
girl sitting behind me, just like the little girls with the tiaras at Cinderella, had an Audrey Hepburn pocketbook with her. She had her hair up in an Audrey Hepburn do. There are Audrey Hepburn fans, girl fans, who are out there wanting to see this show. I don't know who else is going to want to see it.
I will tell you that this was more. This was certainly, you know, everyone always says, a lot of people say Holly is more Marilyn Monroe than Audrey Hepburn. Certainly here she's doing Audrey Hepburn. George Wett is also in the show. I'm sorry, Corey Michael Smith is Fred, and he's good. And this is more his show than Holly's, ironically. And he's good in the role. George Wett is from Cheers, is very underused, even though he's been promoted from bar patron to bar keep.
Yes, very good.
Before we come to our conclusions, we actually have some scenes. So let's take a look at Breakfast at Tiffany's.
I see pieces of her all the time. A flat little bottom, any skinny girl that walks fast and straight. Do you think I'm round the bend?
No, it's just I didn't know that you'd been in love with her.
Drinks on the house.
It was good to see you, Joe.
Now, hold on. Sure. I loved her. But it wasn't that I wanted to touch her. I'm not crazy. I knew how it was. And I swear that never crossed my mind with Holly. But you can love someone without it being like that. You just keep them a stranger. A stranger who's a friend. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Oh, Miss Holliday Golightly.
Only to my creditors.
I
don't mean it. I don't have creditors. I'm cash only. What I mean is, you'll call me Holly.
And you can call me...
Fred. Yes, I know. I've already started. On second look, this place wouldn't be quite such a dungeon if you'd frou-frou it up a bit. Have you given it any thought?
I think of nothing else.
Oh, I'm so glad. What have you come up with?
There's a bird cage in that antique store around the corner.
I don't like things in cages.
Oh, there's nothing in the cage. The cage itself is the attraction. It's all mosques and minarets and bamboo rooms.
Buy it, then.
I'm planning to. It's $350, but I expect to make that easily.
Oh, gorgeous.
Over the next 6 or 7 years.
Oh. You actually are poor, not just play acting.
He quite liked them. The stories, that is.
And who wouldn't? I haven't been able to get that one you read me out of my mind. It rattles me.
You were bored silly.
Delayed reaction, darling. I am positively trailed by it. A sorrow for which no name had yet been devised. La condition humaine.
Yes!
Poor slob. Poor slob without a name. It's a little inconvenient, his not having a name, but then I haven't any right to give him one until he belongs to somebody.
How did he come to be your roommate anyway? He doesn't look like a lesbian.
Because we sort of took up by the river one day. He's an independent, and so am I.
Well, it doesn't take much to own a cat. You just feed him and he's yours.
No, I don't want to own anything until I know the place where me and Stings belong together. I don't know where that is just yet, but I know what it feels like.
In conclusion, Audrey Hepburn and Moon River are a very hard act to follow, and I will give this show a generous 2.5
You
playbills.
don't even mention Mickey Rooney and George Papard.
Well, they didn't have the Mickey Rooney character.
They did.
Here.
There was that Japanese photographer in this.
I thought
he
Mickey
was
Rooney was the landlord.
He was the Japanese photographer landlord.
Right, but
It was all made.
yeah,
There's a
but-
Japanese character. Let's not argue
all
about
right,
it. We
fine.
want to
It was a
give points.
Japanese character.
You gave it 2.5.
Who was nothing
No,
like Mickey
he was
Rooney.
a tall, handsome guy. You gave it 2.5, and I will give it the same 2.5.
All right. And that is our show for the evening. So when you go to the theater, look for Leslie and me, us too.
On the aisle.
Thank you.